interaction if we have ample time. So like yeah, I'd love that if you like if anyone want to intervene in between and put out their thoughts on any question. So
Maybe we just raise our hand. That way we don't talk
right,
for each other.
yeah,
So that, because since you're mostly relying on audio. Hi, Mousa.
correct.
Hey guys.
Hi.
What's happening? Thanks for joining us.
Trying to figure this shit out. Hang on.
The internet?
Yeah. Is this okay?
But yeah, you are audible.
I just want to
and
make
we
sure
can
it's
see
all
you.
working.
Musa is in the opposite of where Karim is.
Yes.
I'm in my dungeon.
You look great.
Make sure you frame out the bodies.
So shit ton of cameras behind me.
Okay, so Mousa, what we were saying when you arrived is that because we're recording the audio for Abhishek, what we're going to do is have maybe if people want to talk to raise their hands, just so we don't talk over each other, since he's going to be transcribing a lot of this stuff.
Okay.
Is that good?
Yeah.
And he'll try to direct some questions at specific people, just so we can. I'm just trying to give him clean audio.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, cool. So how shall we begin?
Well, first of all, welcome to Film Thread, guys. Really loved the movie. I guess it was one of a kind of experience for me. Haven't seen such a conceptual film in a very long while. And congratulations! I have been following the movie's Instagram account, and it's great to see that the film is doing great at festivals. So, yeah, all of you have done some terrific work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'd like to begin with a question for Sarah and Michael. So, like I guess it's the most obvious question. Why Giuliano Mircamis, and how did you find out about him, about his filmography and his journey as an activist, and or let's say how did he find you and became the source of this movie?
I mean, I'll give you. I think Sarah and I will probably have different answers because she has a kind of different approach to like this specific material. But for me, it was actually because I was trying to curate an exhibition with Palestinian and Israeli artists who work on intergenerational trauma, right? And I was looking at people who are making video work after the Nakba and after the occupation, and even 3 or 4 generations after the Holocaust. And I got some really amazing artists, but they did not want to be in the same room. They didn't want their work exhibited in the same room. Palestinians, for obvious reasons, didn't feel like they wanted to be tokenized, especially because I'm an Israeli American. And Israelis felt very sensitive about the potential backlash. And so I had like 3 or 4 months to fill a gallery. And the gallery director said, well, you're a filmmaker. Why don't you make a film? And I said, what the fuck am I going to make a film about in 3 months? Right. And so I think I was having a conversation with someone and said, this is a very dangerous thing to try to occupy both of these realms simultaneously. It's very dangerous. And one person who tried to do that and kind of suffered for it was Giuliano Mircamis. And then I went into a kind of research hole into Giuliano. And when I saw the video of him talking about his assassination in a kind of predictive way, I and then found out that he had been assassinated, I thought there has got to be a movie in here, right? I think Sarah maybe had a different kind of relationship to the material.
So I mean, I came about this from actually having studied. I wrote a master's dissertation on the peace process in Northern Ireland and Israel, and yeah, I was wrong about everything. And so at the point where Michael had begun working on this, some other people had approached me about what was happening in Israel and Palestine, and about what kind of approaches that we could take, because a lot of what's happening in the United States here is not really dissimilar to what's happening in India in terms of the way that that certain groups of people are fostering hatred. So
Right.
I was looking to be involved in a project, and Michael and I have been besties for an eternity, and so just sort of those two things lined up, and I feel like Giuliano was an excellent representation of what we were trying to say and its complexities. And I think part of what's interesting is even as time has passed since we've made the film, some of more of these complexities have come out. And so, like, for instance, there's a moment in the film where there's where I believe Karim is sort of starts humming a tune from Fiddler on the Roof. And just about 3 weeks ago, that actor who's very famous and who I mispronounced in a chat because I'm brain dead. Adam, do you want to correct me here so I don't fuck it up again? He played Topol, and his name is, I want to say, Chaim Potok.
No, he didn't play Topol. His name is Topol. He played Tevye.
Yeah, he played Tevye.
Topol
And I was
played
in this play
Terry. Yeah.
twice.
Chaim
cannot
Topol
get
played
it right.
Tevye in
Yeah, so I
Fiddler on the
clearly
Roof.
got it wrong. At any rate, he passed away, and his family, with permission, came out and said that he'd actually been active in the Mossad throughout a lot of his later career, which I felt added another level to what we had produced.
Because,
Even if I
like, sorry, yeah, carry on.
so wait, it was Chaim Topol that was allegedly in the
played
Mossad.
Tevye.
Yeah, but you're saying he had been a Mossad?
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I remember.
Well, he did some things for the Mossad. He moved some papers here and there and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, like, here's the presumption that I think we can all make is, like, when you're a person with that level of access, that, like, traditionally in history, those people are very useful for the intelligence services. Like, ballerinas are, actors are, like, believe it or not, journalists and travel writers. Like, that's who intelligence assets are. The fact that his family came out and said it because he wanted it said at this moment in history, I think, is the part that's remarkable. Like, nobody ever had to know that, and yet he wanted to make sure people knew.
And as you said, Michael, how artists from Israel and Palestine, they were skeptical of working on this project. So have anyone from like Israeli or Palestinian descent, even among the audience, has approached you about the movie if they have watched it? And what were their responses?
Well, I mean, Mousa is Palestinian and was working on the project, but in terms of our
And Adam's Israeli.
And Adam is Israeli and was in the military, right? So the film itself embodies that dichotomy, but we've been kind of roundly rejected by both Jewish and Arab festivals. So we haven't been in those crowds. Most of the crowds we've been at have been filled with, Jewish people, maybe Muslims who have an opinion about cinema, but not because they're kind of leading with their religion or nationality. I mean, am I mistaken, Sarah, in terms of the questions that we got in Beverly Hills? Or,
I mean, Beverly Hills is like, a very particular crowd, because, like, I don't know how much you know about it is a town that is run by Iranian Jews, which means that, like, you are going to wind up with a group of people that are largely going to be Jewish. So far, we haven't had the opportunity to show it enough that I feel like we have a very good answer yet.
Yeah.
However, I think that we have, like, the thing that I think has changed and that, like, it is changing the trajectory of the opportunities to show this film is that, like, before the protest started in January, we were like, it's kind of common wisdom that if you make a film about Israel and Palestine or Saudi Arabia, you're not going to get into festivals and you're not going to get on TV. Like, you're not going to get distributed because, like, the state of the world is what it is right now. That changed when those protests became something different in January. And, like, that says a lot about, like, what political power means. Because what's happening is that American Jews are pissed. And, like, they're beginning to understand what's actually happening over there, which I don't think had happened, honestly, for 20 years. And I think that's, like, even the more conservative Jews that, like, were very frankly stoking these waves of, like, of separatism that was happening in this country have recognized what they've done. So I don't know. That gives me optimism. And I think even talking to people, like, in the interim, like, I just think we are getting into more and more. We're having more and more opportunities every day. And I don't want to be like, oh, that's great because this horrible thing is happening. We're, benefiting from that. But I think there's a straight line from those protests to our ability to get this film shown.
I can actually relate to political intervention in cinema because in India, we have got a lot of movies which get censored or banned just because they are trying to highlight something which is remarked as controversial in the media, but it's actually important. So yeah, I
Yeah.
can understand that.
No, I
So,
mean it's very much what's happening. And I want to make sure that we get some time to the actors because they are far more interesting than Michael and I.
right.
But that it is literally an exact thing that is the same thing that's happening in India. And in fact, you can see it in the Oscar nominations that a very nationalist film, which I think a lot of people in
Right.
India that have some problems with is what wound up being nominated. So it is exactly analogous. It's exactly the same thing. You're totally correct.
So, firstly, I'd like to go to Karim, Musa, and Adam. All three of you. Three of you play different character types of Giuliano Mekhamis. How did you three approach to those three character types? Because throughout the movie, you actually get to transit between all the three types. You are not playing just a single character. You are changing dresses throughout the film, and you are changing character shades. So how did you three approach to those roles, and how familiar were you with the work of Giuliano Mekhamis earlier? So yeah, that's,
Who wants to go first?
yeah. Adam, I don't
Okay.
know. Yeah.
So I did know about Giuliano Marcomes before I grew up in Israel. I saw
Hmm.
some of his movies, and I knew him as a celebrity that everybody likes. He was a really funny, good-looking, one of those like bigger than life kind of characters. So everybody knew who he is. Um, so I did know about him. Actually, somehow I missed the fact that he was killed because by then I was here, and I guess I didn't know that until I came to the movie. I didn't realize that he was killed. Actually, I have a friend that did a movie with him. Um, Anyway, so I did know who he is, and I did know that he's half Arab, half Jewish, which is always a very strange thing to have in Israel. Um, and
I'm going to
and
interrupt you for
then
a second. Now. I feel like you bring that up so brilliantly during the film about how unusual that is, and there's a moment in the film where you do that maybe you want to reference.
what is that? Sorry.
You reference in the film like how unusual it is to have mixed blood in Israel, and I thought I would draw you back to that since that's what you were saying.
Oh yeah. It just, I mean, it's kind of like nobody likes you because it's just, or at the same time, everybody likes you. It's just the mix of these two things of like you don't know what you're getting into when you're meeting people because it's like and he says it he said it in interviews before that he's like I'm Jewish when I'm in Tel Aviv and I'm an Arab when I'm in Jenin,
Yeah.
and or sometimes vice versa on purpose. He's doing like he's now just to piss people off and make them feel that kind of thing. So my character was the one that was both, and
Right.
trying to ignore all these facts of like what he is and where he was born because he has no control over it, and then being the guy who's trying to figure out what this whole thing means. And me being Israeli, I have my opinions about the political situation, but then I of course see the other side of the situation just as well, in my opinion. And I try to um, figure out how somebody that would go through a life of this complexity would live his life, not his not his personal life, but more like his career, like an actor. He's just an actor, that's what he wanted to be. He didn't, he wanted to be a guy and an actor and a guy who goes to the supermarket. And how do you do that when you are half and everybody always constantly you're being reminded that you're half of this and half of that and not good enough here and not good enough there. I think that's pretty, I mean, I'm sure that's why he became an activist, because he was just like, I can't take this anymore. I don't know who likes me, who hates me, and why I'm like this. So that's what I tried to do in the film is trying to see, and I think it come across as, especially in the editing, I like the fact that it comes across that he doesn't really know what to say sometimes. He doesn't know which side to refer to, and he's just stop.
Right.
Let's just go. Let's just do what we're supposed to do, and don't think about it. Let's not argue about it. Let's not think about it. But that's obviously not an option. You always have to eventually talk about it. So that's what I try to do and see it meshes together, the two parts.
Yeah, and since you played the public persona, and so you were actually embodying the most realistic aspect of his life, probably. And even in the dialogues, that conflict was visible. The conflict Giuliano must have faced because of being both of Palestinian and Israeli descent.
Yeah,
Thanks.
yeah, and
Yeah.
I say it too. It's like this is the
Right.
caricature of Palestinian. This is a caricature of Israelis, and I'm the only human being here.
Yes, you are the
And then
human
you
being.
throw me out of the problem, which is
Right.
exactly how it usually goes.
Yeah.
What about
Musa? Uh,
What, me?
yeah, Musa. Yeah, yeah. Would you like to take?
What was the question again? Just let me hear it again.
So, what was your approach to the role, to the parts that you were playing in the movie, and how familiar you were with Giuliano Mirkamis and his filmography early?
Okay, so my approach to the part and how familiar was it? I knew about him, but I honestly didn't know much. I've heard stories about the Janine Theater, but I was raised in here in the States, so a lot of my work was more focused on uh, just theater here and films here. But I knew of his stuff, and after I met Michael, I did my research, and then I got to know him even further. How did I approach it? I approached it with a very skewed version of what I would think a Palestinian would feel in that situation. Just coming from the perspective of if I could take as many Palestinian voices from what I've heard and stories throughout the year and just years and just put it into one character, and this was the only opportunity to say what they wanted to say. This was me saying it.
Karim?
Yeah, I'm glad that I was last because I've been trying to remember. And I think the way that it happened was, I mean, I guess for me, the way it always happens, when I get a piece of a script or a piece of an audition, very rarely do I first do research. My first step is always to go completely from almost an intuitive reconstruct. I try to intuitively reconstruct a path into a character based on what I'm reading. And so the scene that I got when I was auditioning for this was, I think, two scenes. It was from both Amos Gitaï films. I had seen all of Amos Gitaï's films, but when I was given the audition, the way that I function, I didn't even care to remember or to know where that text was from. I took it very progressively, which is my process begins internally with, this is what's happening on the page. Let me investigate, and I go blind. Progressively, I allowed myself to be aware of Giuliano, and I made all the connections that were necessary. I'd seen him in films, and I met people who'd met him, and but by then I had already built up. I was already ready to meet him in a way. I had already conditioned myself to a place where I was going to meet a character. I was thinking about who would say those lines and who would, have that job the way that he had. By the time I started reading about him, I had already made a lot of it mine, because I don't like things to interrupt my process. It's internal. I feel it's very intimate. What happens later in any project when something comes theoretical or stylistic, or an identity is pinned onto a character, that for me is the last step. It's almost like the icing on the cake. I think the foundation is always pretty much the same. I'm driven by this, it's almost like, you know, you read a couple of lines of how somebody talks, and you know the context, and then I start dreaming about it. You know, I sit down and I start imagining what that would be. I remember my first thoughts that I had when I read the script. I remember this feeling of traffic jam. And I grew up in a city with a lot of traffic jam. I didn't bring that in, but I remember vividly I had those pages and I was about to do this audition for Michael, and I was stuck in a traffic jam. I was in a car that would have been maybe an old Peugeot from the 80s. Those were my sensation, the old leather stuff, the traffic jam, the honking. And I think I came out of a traffic jam into this character.
I think one thing that was interesting about the process is that, you know, when I cast the actors, they weren't cast for specific Giulianos. We actually did a full day of table reading, where we read through the script 3 times, which each of them playing a different part, right? Because we didn't yet know how things would go, right? How things would go down. And part of that process that was so interesting was getting feedback from the actors and getting a sense of, well, who might fit where. I mean, one of the things that was really interesting is that Karim said, look, I think you're tipping your hand a little bit, because you're being a little too hard on the Israeli side, and you're not really representing the kind of the romanticism and what an Israeli might feel about, you know, Palestine as a place to have occupied in the first place, to have arrived at, right? And so it was really interesting to hear how the script had to kind of be rebalanced in a way, right? And then it became a very apparent that only Mousa could play the Palestinian, because he could bring a sense of humor that I think nobody would feel the right to bring to the part, right? There's something about the kind of levity that he brings in these really crucial moments that I think changes the film completely. And Adam, I think, was so interesting because he really didn't agree with everything I had written, right? And he was ready to come in and argue. And the thing about Adam that was so brilliant is he started on the 3rd day of the shoot. We actually had another actor cast that wasn't working out. And so Adam came in almost completely cold on the material, but with a very strong opinion, and sometimes a different opinion. And that was what was valuable, is that we didn't all agree on what this meant, nor Sarah.
No,
I mean,
also,
we didn't all cohere around one opinion. I mean, Salome had her own opinions. Like that, the argument was the thing that we were, you know, that was like, okay, we got something. If we start arguing, that's keep shooting, don't stop.
and I think also, like, on that note, in terms of Salome, like, I feel like, you know, she also entered into the film late,
The night before, yeah. We also had to replace the actor that was cast in that role, right? So there were a lot of
and I think it put her in a position of, like, actually, like, you know, having to learn some of this on the fly, like, but, you know, she has because of her background, because she comes from a background that, like, has a lot of history in her background, she knew quite a bit. I'm talking for you, Salome. I'm gonna let you do it yourself.
Yeah, I was born in Iran, and I guess a Muslim. I'm not really religious, but yeah, I have a lot of issues with the Islamic Republic and how you're forced to be a Muslim or whatever in Iran, and how they treat women. But anyway, it was interesting. I had no idea what I was getting myself into, and honestly, when I was reading the script, I was really confused. I mean, it was very heavy, and I was trying to figure out what my role was, and but I guess we worked through it, and
I want to key you on something. I think that you also came from working at the BBC. And so, like, I feel like you had, like, your perspective, both, like, from Iran and from the UK. And as, like, someone who's reported news, like, I feel like that added such a dimension to that role, especially in terms of learning about Giuliano on the fly. Because I don't think he would have come in with a background. I'm trying to cue you here, if that's making any sense.
Yeah, no, because I feel like my opinions were so mixed about the conflict in Israel and Palestine, and like on the one hand, I was really supportive of the people of Palestine and all their plight and everything that's been happening, and then on the other hand, I had personally, I was like involved and in love with this Israeli guy, and I went to Israel a few times, and I fell in love with Israel. And then I was like, there was a lot of conflict, in my opinion, of this conflict, because I always found myself fighting for both sides, depending who I was talking to. You know what I mean? So, but yeah, and I did think that having that in my background, especially being from Iran and working at the BBC, which is a very complicated thing within the Iranian community, because they think it represents the Iranian government. All of that, I think, and being British, all of that, I thought brought a richness to this character, and for the role and for the film, that there's a lot to read into it, because I was thinking, oh, am I representing the United Kingdom and the role that they played in the creation of Israel, or am I representing the United Nations? Am I God? Am I just like playing with these people and being the protagonist? So it was, yeah, I think it was it worked out well for me anyway.
I'll just circle back to the point you said about how personal beliefs and conflicts, might have played a role over here. But Salome, your role actually intrigued me in a different manner as well. Like apart from the personal beliefs and religious sentiments, you you are kind of holding this whole narrative together over here. You are playing the director, and it's like just like it's a film within a film, and just like a director holds the entire set and production together, it's your job to hold these three actors who are auditioning together. Keep them in one frame and keep them conversating with each other. So how did you develop that aspect of your character firstly, and how was your on-set relationship with Michael, because he's the director of the movie, and you both are kind of acting together on building this whole movie. So
yeah, I think well, Michael helped me so much in terms of directing me, because as I said, I was really lost, especially at the beginning. I didn't know what I was doing, and I discovered the character as we were filming, and I think I finally discovered her at the end on the last day. But of course, Michael doing his magic, he was very Michael, I don't think that we didn't have any issues or anything. We didn't have that argument. It was a very gentle process for me, I think.
How collaborative it was.
Yeah, it was very collaborative, very gentle, and I feel like I was just nudged on certain points. I don't know if
I mean, you did. I think that one of the things that Salome would say to me, I'm not, where's, what is she supposed, I mean, you would have these questions about like, is this God? Is this, is this that? I don't know that I necessarily had the answers. I knew that the part was written as having the kind of control over these characters. And beyond that, I think a lot of it is stuff that we discovered on set, in the same way that discovery happened with all of the actors, which is to say that there were times where they would say, well, what do you mean by this line? And I would say, I'm not so sure. What do you think it means? So, a lot of it is, the piece was kind of living and breathing as we were making it. It's not like we had a script that was finished and never touched again. It's that, everybody contributed. Sarah interjected with a lot of really interesting citations from political leaders that and
suggestions for research as well. Sarah provided us with a wealth of citations, research. She created a board from citations to pick from, and they were all actually backed up by, you always had a link or an interview, you always had something to go to. And she would send me articles in the evening. I remember I read every night, maybe 2 hours of material that Sarah sent me.
Jesus, I'm very sorry. I want to come back to one point that Salome made real quickly, and I'll bring this back to the course that we're just talking about. But I feel like what Salome did, like we keep mentioning this sort of British aspect, and I feel like so much of what happened in the establishment of Israel was Britain not really being sure what the fuck to do. And like there is, I feel like that is part of what the confusion of that character had to mean, and was like very hard for an actor to portray. And I don't like, I think Salomé's background was like so perfectly suited for that. And it was, but simultaneously it was hard for like, I think for everybody to not want to like, to want to keep it that way. It's hard to like sit in the confusion. So coming full circle, back to the quotes. One of the things that is in the film is like there's a great moment with Karim where he talks about like how what these expectations are. It's like if you're going to keep people, you know, in these conditions, like what do we expect that's going to happen? And the second part of that quote, it's a quote from Yitzhak Rabin, and it is the first time in the 1970s that he mentioned that he called Israel an apartheid state. And I feel like it's really a crucial thing about this project to understand that like so many of the quotes that you hear that are like you might think are very pro-Israel or very pro-Palestine actually came from the opposite side. And so like I think like right now we're having this like this I think rather grotesque debate about the word apartheid, when it frankly it is a word that came out of the mouths of several Israeli prime ministers in the 1970s and 80s. And so just discussing this as if this is some sort of anti-Semitic statement, you know, is ahistoric and intellectually dishonest. And I feel like that's the part of the piece, like even annotating it, like when you see how many of these quotes came from these leaders that established the state, it's kind of astonishing because you're just like, oh my God, like that does not seem like something we would think Arafat or Abbas would say. So brought that full circle from the British to Arafat.
Yeah.
So next is I think I'm just mentioning it. I think Karim and Mousa, you both have played minor roles in the movie Munich back in 2005, if I'm right. Right? Yeah. So like I'm using Munich as a very big example to make a point that there are several films made in Hollywood, made across the globe that have touched upon this long-standing conflict, but probably hasn't been able to go into the depth of it, and which yes, Rubino actually does. It gets into the conflict in a more conversational way so that people get in the depth of it. So this is a question directed to everyone. How do you feel like a conceptual film like this makes a difference? When you're talking about such grave topics, which are often sensationalized in commercial cinema. So, like, what's your take on that? Anyone can begin.
You wanted to go, Mousa? You were launching.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was gonna say.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say because, the difference, what I see, Munich to me wasn't a film about Israel and Palestine. Munich was more about a film about, and a man who was having a moral dilemma by the actions of his own government. It didn't really dive into the whole Palestinian-Israeli situation. I think it was more questioning the actions of Israel itself.
Right. Yeah, that's why I said like it's kind of a vague example.
No. I think it's a great example because the counterpart to that with this film, because this film is so experimental in its style and Michael's vision, is that it kind of gives us the freedom to be able to talk about it and really throw in the most humanistic aspects from this man's life, which the subtext is him representing all these different versions of himself, being Israel and Palestine and the in-between. So I think with this kind of film, you get the freedom to be able to really talk about the matters that people won't talk about. You could be raw, you could be crass, you can be offensive, and yet you can still come from a very humanistic place. I think, after I saw the film, I remember thinking how me and Karim's character truly came from a place where you think these two people are going to murder one another. And in the very ending, there's the most humanistic, lovable moment between them, because I think they really see each other for who they are. mirror images of who they are. And I think that's probably the best definition of how you can explain Israel and Palestine.
Are we still here? Yeah. So if I understand your question, it's a question about the efficacy of film, or is it a question about the history of that subject in film?
I'd say the efficacy of film, of filmmaking in general, how cinema can be used to
Okay, so I
yeah.
understood correctly. Okay.
Yeah.
So I have this, I've been thinking about this for a very long time, because same as Mousa, we've been thrown into these films that sometimes were political and thematically political. I was never able to answer that question for myself about the efficacy of film, because I think my experience of it is that you can show an object to people, and there is never, even if it's completely spelled out, a common view of what is being transmitted. This idea that Obama said about, different information universes, I think at the time it was like a bipartisan vision, but I think that kind of duality is now fragmented. It's a mosaic of independent information universes. I mean, even our interpretation of the news, I mean, if you give people the raw material, the way that they respond to the very, the rawest information, the way that they respond to witnessing something is completely different. And completely conditioned. And the conditioning recycles itself. I wonder in that case whether it's not always echo chamber, always preaching to the choir. And I wonder, in a sense, if our responsibility doesn't become to actually have the courage to do something that is esoteric. And I think my approach to it was that I was not going to worry about what or who will understand what I was trying to experience in the space, but I was going to give myself the freedom to experience it as intelligently and fully as possible, with the hope that those who can read, identify, or deny, or contradict what I'm doing, because for somebody to contradict what you're doing, they have to see it. I'm waiting for somebody to oppose what I'm doing in a way that is intimate, in a way that actually dismantles it from the inside, and not just by superimposing themes and dualities and recycled political ideas about there's in a kind of quantum way. Right now we might be having this interview and the conflict could be resolved. We don't the cat is in the box, the cat is not in the box. What if we're trapped in this conversation and somehow the conflict on the ground over there is resolved and we know nothing about it? And it's not okay, but I never tackle cinema. I don't burden cinema with that responsibility. I find within cinema the space to investigate and transmit, and come what may. I don't approach things thematically. I don't approach it thematically.
Well, I think one of the things that was so precious about this process was the come what may attitude. I mean, on the one hand, we all spend our time working on commercial films in one capacity or another. Braxton Pope, our producer, is he works on I would say like very kind of intellectual art films that I think are received in the kind of conventional sense of cinema. Where Sarah comes at it with a really strong rooting in the kind of intellectual history. And for me, I was mostly an artist who showed stuff in galleries, right? So one of the provocations that we made in this process, as the producers, before we even approached the actors, was what if we just made a film that was exactly what the film wanted itself to be? What if we just let it kind of speak to us and we just followed whatever happened, regardless of the difficulty that we might have experienced? Now, Braxton, is more conscious of the kind of conventional requirements, right? So there was always a kind of tension about, making a film that doesn't offer any answers, and in fact just tries to kind of present the problem, we were aware of that challenge. We had all kind of the wide range of the spectrum of voices in the room for ourselves as we were generating this. And then as the actors came in, the work that we did, all three of us, Sarah and Braxton and I, and the cast, and even the kind of key departments of the editor and the cinematographer, was just to try to maintain that space where we wouldn't kind of push it towards an outcome, right? Just be there to observe. The camera crew, we had 5 cameramen running cameras 6 hours a day continuously. They were told, listen, if we stop and start having an argument about the material and the text, you keep rolling, right? If you need to come in and do makeup, we just keep rolling, right? If there's something that has to be tweaked, that becomes part of the film. If there's an interruption because of some sound, that becomes part of the film. So I think the effort went into creating that space for all of us, right? It was
Right.
That's where we put our energies. And so what you saw is just what happened in that space.
That means that like there was a very big room for improvisation, because of course it was also visible in dialogues as well, that a lot of stuff has been improvised. And Sarah, Michael, it also seemed a difficult, or you can say tricky production process as well, because all the 3 actors are on a rotating stage, right? Salome is behind the mirror, and the production equipment is visible throughout. The cameras revolving and everything. So how did you guys pull that off, and how does that shape your idea of making of this particular narrative?
You were asking me this question? Did I hear
Yeah,
my
both
name?
of
Or am
yeah.
I-
I think I'd have both of you give 2 points, some pointers.
I'm not sure I have a good answer for Michael. Do you want to start with how you came
Well,
to?
I mean,
include this
when we were
stage?
talking about it, when we were talking about it in the early days, Sarah and Braxton and I, it was, we wanted to make a film that we could shoot in 10 days, right? And that we could complete in that time. And we, the concept for the rotating stage really became about how do you activate a space that's a finite space, because again, you can't, if we're not running around to a bunch of locations because we're trying to do it in 10 days, then we've got to create almost like a stage, right? And so the revolving stage was both a kind of thematic idea, which is like there's a dizzying effect to all of these identities, but it was also logistically, it made our job easier in a way, right? To just give up on trying to kind of create this fake universe inside, and to give up on saying like, well, when are we going to rehearse and when are we going to film? Well, let's just film everything. Let's film the rehearsal, right? We told the actors to not necessarily be off book when they showed up, right? We wanted to see them working through the process of memorizing, and kind of improvising and kind of writing in some of this text that Sarah had pulled, and you know what I'm saying? So it's like, we didn't want them to come in finished and polished and rehearsed it. Like, we wanted to rehearse it. We had to spend, half a day figuring out how to walk on a rotating stage. I think just that was, so it was almost easier because we could be rough around the edges, I think. Right, Sarah? I feel like that was...
Yeah, no, I think it was like, it actually added a level of like unpredictability and chaos that like we were trying to produce. And I don't know if we knew that was what the result was going to be. And in fact, this is obviously insane. It was a bad idea. I will now agree with you. Like I came at it from like, when I was looking at revolving stages, like, you kind of think of Hamilton and certain things, but I started looking at community theater videos of like how like small places that have no money build them. And so like, I learned an awful lot about the way they were constructed, and had this fantasy that Michael was very quick to dash that that's what we were going to do. But it did. I think it did. Like, I'm more curious about like for me, the real question is like, how did that impact the way it felt to perform? Because like, I don't have any idea how it felt to perform while I, was being spun in circles. So maybe some of the actors.
The great thing about it is we didn't have to stop for different frames. So we didn't have to do reverses. We didn't have to say, okay, now do it again for a close-up, now do it for a while. for a while. And the reality of it is, you spin on that thing 3-4 times, you know exactly where every camera is, because there was one camera that traveled. It was on a rail, not a dolly. I think it was on a rail, and I think most of them were stationary.
No, there was
So
there were 3 rails and one
3 rails
180-degree dolly. So there was
and 180, yes, and 180.
the one would
But
follow the
what,
semicircle and the other.
right?
It was like a
But
train
what
track.
happened?
You can see it in
But
film.
what happened is you quickly knew where the camera was, is what I'm saying. And so you very quickly knew that, this is, where you were. You understood where you were, and you were surrounded. So it's almost, for the actor, you're filming with so many cameras, a lot more is being picked up. You are going around in circles, but you get the hang of it. And it has a rhythm. What I'm trying to say is there were a lot of constants. And so it was freeing because we didn't have all these setups, but there were enough constants that you can time things and meet certain points. And that made it, for me, fun and easy.
I'd like to actually go to Adam right now. I'd like to tell us something about his experience with this character, because as you said that your character was the as you approached it, was the human being between the two amidst the whole conflict. So I just wanted to know what was a creative approach to the role, because being a film lover, I actually viewed a lot of stuff thematically throughout the movie. So yeah, Adam, would you like make us go through that?
Yeah. So it's when I say I was the only human character in there, I mean, like, both of them were half humans. They were just portraying that one half of their humanity, which is exactly the problem in these type of situations, is that half of it is being considered, the other half is not. And even people that fight a certain fight, when they fight this fight, they feel only half of who they are. Even in Republicans against Democrats, and Palestinians against Israelis, and Nazis against Jews, and it's always somehow you're being pushed into thinking just half of your brain and going for a goal that is only half of who you are. At the end of the day, everybody thinks the same and feels the same things, and that's what I try to bring is to combine the two parts of how human beings are, and approach it from not a political side, and not ethnic background, and not none of those defining attributes that people have, but more like, I was a soldier in Israel, and I was in situations that that I was pretty scared. Nothing happened. I didn't kill anyone, and nobody killed me either. But you get to situations that when you're in this pressured situation, you just don't care anymore if you're Israeli, Arab, whatever. You care about yourself as a human being, and how not to get hurt, and how to help your friends, and it doesn't. It's a little hard to explain.
Right.
Trying to say, but what I'm trying to say is that I try to shed off all the things that would define me as somebody, and think about how to solve the situation between two people that actually want the same thing. Everybody wants the same thing. Everybody wants to live in peace, and everybody wants to be okay, and everybody wants to be able to go to work and come back and have a quiet life. It's just everybody sees it differently, unless you, of course, you're a nutcase, but this is not the situation. And then and just so I try to focus on that, of solving the situation, not how to solve it, but just to solve it. Just to go for it and just understand each other enough. You don't have to fully understand each other. You have to understand each other enough to be able to live together, and just like Giuliano actually said that in this interview. He said, not in coexistence, but in existence.
But in
Doesn't
existence.
matter. Just respect enough of each other to be able to be okay, and then it would be okay. But that's just not how it works, and that's why I have the problem with the two other characters. They're all going just thinking one way. I mean,
I actually,
I didn't always agree on everything I said and everything I did as a character, but I think that's, even though I don't agree with that, I think that's actually the right way. But it's hard to separate yourself from some of your beliefs, you know, and then growing up in a certain way, and the Palestinian side, they think certain things about the Israelis, and growing up in Israeli, they think about the Palestinians, all kind of things that, even if they're not true, you grew up like that. And then, so it's, yeah, it's just, I just try to get to the silver lining
right.
of be a human being and just solve this that way.
Yeah, that's actually great being honest about it, you know, about how personal beliefs might affect the entire process.
Well, it's just, I'm
And
not
yeah,
saying that I have personal belief.
yeah,
I don't
no,
know.
but
I don't.
yeah, like,
I'm
but
not saying that you know, that I'm a, you know,
yeah, I guess
right wing
yeah,
Israeli that wants to kill all the Palestinians. It's definitely
no,
not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, except Mousa, who is the only one here who is anyway. But I'm just saying that people, everybody has their own perception of everything, and it's never how you see it and how you imagine it, ever, no matter what subject you're talking about. It's never going to be exactly how you think it is, and that's, I think, where the solution is.
Yeah,
no,
most
I
of
understand that, because yeah, I also come from a country with, you know, such kind of issues, and we have also, you know, been we also grew, like, I also grew up in a certain kind of environment, and, you know, heard a lot of different things about such conflicts. And of course, as I grew up, as I started to see the world with my own eyes, it's only then that, you know, I understood
Yeah.
What the reality is, and how unnecessary these things are.
Yeah. And even then, when you see it with your own eyes, you don't always see what you actually see. You just see what you actually understand from it. Just like Karim said, that you can show someone a banana and everybody's going to see a different thing in that banana. The perception is all up to interpretation of everybody's,
Right.
you know, everybody. Yeah.
Michael, in the movie, you also appear in certain sequences, you know, breaking the fourth wall. So, what was the idea behind it? How did that come into play? Because that was very interesting, you know. And as soon as the fourth wall breaks, it's mostly it gets into the movie gets colored, you know. It's
yeah, that
shot in
was
black and
the
white
first.
otherwise, but
I think the first moment was with Salome, in, like, you know, the first whatever 10 or 15 minutes of the film. I mean, again, you know, we I started out directing theater, and I love the way the theater works. I love the process of rehearsing large expanses of text, as opposed to what Karim was referring to before, which is like shot, say a line, you know, reverse shot, close up, say this word, then push in for that. To me, that interrupts a lot of the flow, and I think that that's why I wanted us to work in that kind of theatrical space, right, where we were rehearsing and performing almost at the same time. And so, if we're setting up the conditions for that, it's kind of dishonest to just hide behind the other side of the camera while giving people direction, and logistically it's a lot of stopping and starting. So some of this stuff is kind of theoretical and thematic for us in terms of why we chose to do it, and some of it made it very practical to just say, look, if I'm going to give you direction, let's just keep going, right? And I think that it was important to kind of, you know, my 9-year-old daughter, who was in the room with me editing for a long time, with, you know, while I was watching stuff, she would say things like, well, Dad, I thought that, why is she the director? I thought that you were the director. And I was like, oh, now you're getting it, right? So it's like, there was something about the kind of honesty of opening up the entire process that removed all of the bullshit of suspending disbelief, and also the bullshit around constructing identity, right? Which is, it's a fake, it's a sham, it's just like a construction. It's like, I am Israeli, but I'm also American, and I don't feel at home in Israel necessarily, and I don't feel at home in America, so I'm kind of in neither and both. To me, that's intellectually much more honest like Adam was saying, it's like it's anytime somebody reduces the argument into like it's this or that, I think that's dishonest, right? So there was part of the kind of intellectual honesty of the piece to say, look, we got to show it all, right? We have to show all of it, and breaking that construction and that kind of bubble is the point. Like you can't do all of this work and then say, okay, the cameras and the director won't be seen because that's the kind of project that we're doing. No, I think they need to be seen. We're trying to be honest about the whole thing. So you see the cards that Sarah created, right? You see those cards with the quotes in the background. You can see that stuff because it's everywhere. We wanted actors to just kind of walk up to it, take it, write it in their script, decide where they're going to put it. I mean, we had something like 260 hours of footage when we finished 10 days. So we have a ton of stuff to go through that, there's probably 3 more movies in here.
And your movie was, I was going through the press release, and I was researching about the films and early interviews you might have given. So the movie was once titled as the Messiah Triangle, if I am correct.
No, it was actually that was actually the short. It was a short film.
Okay.
When we started the piece, when I started doing the piece, I was writing it as a short, and the script ended up kind of speaking to me and ended up being 80 pages.
Okay.
80 pages became our film, but the Messiah Triangle was actually just a separate piece altogether. That's essentially the first act of the film, right? That exists independently as a short, which ended up being the thing that we screened in a gallery, because I had to satisfy this requirement of just filling a gallery, right? So there were photographs, it was an installation, it was a kind of a gallery exhibition, and the feature is really what we continued to work on after the fact, right? So it was like we had shot everything at once, but it was impossible to edit more than just the first act of it. So the first act is really the Messiah Triangle.
Okay.
Yeah, which exists as a short film separately.
Mousa, yeah. So when I watched the movie, and so Giuliano Mekhamis, I was completely unaware of him, and to be honest, like while watching the movie, I used to pause, and then I used to go to the internet and read more about him so that I can relate to what was going on in the film, because in between the movie, Salome's character is explaining what kind of character type these 3 actors are playing, and she's going through his filmography. So I was also kind of going back to him, and I realized that like that's what I personally felt, that through the movie I got to witness more about the Palestinian side of the conflict, which is often not shown in media over here. Like over here in India, it's kind of not reported so much, and I felt that it was good to actually see both sides simultaneously and realize that there are people who are getting affected by it. Like set apart the political ideologies and political authorities. There are people being affected by it. So Mousa, I wanted to ask you: do you feel the same way, that it's actually this movie actually helped to show more about the Palestinian side of the conflict as well, and to actually show both sides simultaneously and help people understand that it's actually affecting both the countries and people across the border?
Are you asking if this film is sorry, I'm just a little confused. Are you asking if the film itself being shown in these other countries, that it's actually affecting?
No, like through the movies, through this film's conversations, and and the embodiment of Giuliano Mekhamis himself, who was an activist of this, again, who basically revolted against this entire war and this long-standing conflict through art. So I wanted to know your opinion, that do you feel that through this movie the Palestinian side is getting some kind of attention?
Yeah, I think both sides are equally debating their situation. I don't think one is being louder than the other. I think the point of you know, Karim brings as much of a passion into the politics of it from the Israeli perspective as much as I do with the Palestinian perspective. I honestly, it's just I'm glad that the film is out there, and I'm glad that we got a chance to be able to explore and debate. But it's so early in you know the viewership. I'm curious how people are reacting to it, like yourself, and you know the festivals that we're about to go on to, and so I'm excited for that. I'm excited for the conversation to be open, um, and for more people to know the Palestinian side uh, of the situation and the hardships that they go through. Um, yeah, you know, I think it's just in the I there isn't anything about the film that I regret doing. It's I'm very proud of the film, I'm proud of the work, and I'm proud that it's getting out there.
Yeah, I actually don't. I don't intend to, like I hope no one is getting me wrong over here, because I'm just asking these questions because I watched it as a third person, who has no close association with the conflict with the two countries. But it's surreal that you three actors are actually closely associated with it in some way. So, and still you are able to embody these three character types, and bring out a more thematic and a more sentimental output, or a message through this movie. So, and that's my intention to ask you about your own personal connection with these characters and the movie.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, yeah, just like I just didn't want to to get to make the environment tense with any.
It's only tense because there's somebody and that shouldn't be in this. Guy named Adam should not be here.
See,
So
see what happens?
yeah.
Instigating, always instigating, always
Actually,
provoking.
if you want to know, it's funny because we actually all do get along very, very well. That we can have these jokes. Everybody, you know, from my perspective, everybody was really happy and got along. You know, everybody could put a smile on their face except for Karim. I mean, like stuff like that. It was
There, I mean, there were uncomfortable moments. I think there were some tense moments on set, and there were moments
Were there?
I think Sarah and Braxton and I were like, should we stop? Should we stop rolling? I mean, I don't know. I'm kind of curious what it felt like to Salome sometimes, because she's also a third person. She's also an observer in the process while being involved in the process. So do you remember anything about those specific moments? Because there were a few where we were,
Yeah, I remember when you guys had that moment and you pushed each other and you were like fuck you or something. Karim got really we caught it in the film. He got very passionate, and I didn't know if it was really happening or if it was him in the zone, or being the character. And there was another time when you started laughing like crazy, and I was really confused. Like, is he just
I did it on every take, though. I did it almost on every take, and then I had to sort of remind myself not to do it on most takes as a choice. I felt like it was a really comfortable environment to work in.
Yeah.
I felt pretty safe with Mousa and Adam. I was encouraging sometimes. Sometimes I was telling Adam, "Come on, man! Like, crank it up a bit." He was.
Yeah.
I think what we wanted from each other was to have as much. We wanted to experience each other as actors and people as much as we could. I think we were looking for, as much intimacy and provocation and exchanges as possible. I always feel like whenever I leave a project, I always think, okay, maybe if we had another kind of like day, could we have just gone just further for the hell of it? Like could we have one crazy day, But that's the beauty of doing this work. It's very gratifying, and you get to spend, you get this closeness, you get this real closeness that I don't know whether you get it in other jobs. I don't know, but we definitely get that closeness, and we get to really experience each other.
I felt like what was unusual was that like it was like, you know, it was during the pandemic, and there were, it forced a kind of like a smallness. And I don't know, I was very like, it was a time, and I think all of our lives where we had probably not been around a lot of people for a while, so it made it even more. But I think also this project is something that like is kind of part of each of our DNA in a certain kind of way, which created a connection that for me is like, I don't know, it's like there's projects that I've worked on for far, far longer that like I don't have the same kind of like, I mean, I love you guys, like you're very important to me, and I feel like it was a part of making something that I feel like it's become, you know, a part of us, and part like your review. Like I think your review, I don't expect in my lifetime that I will ever have a project that will get a kind of a review like the one that you wrote. Like you wrote a review that understood what we were trying to express in a way that, like, you know, for me, like being understood is basically my drug of choice, and like being able to see that somebody else actually experienced that, besides the people that I had the privilege of working with, is magic. And like, I don't know, I hope that continues to happen. But yeah, I hope to be stuck with this group of people forever.
Well, you guys looked really lovely all together on sets, like coming from another observer over here. So, yeah. Salome, like, firstly, I can't help but notice the tattoos on your wrist. If I'm not intruding in a personal space, and I also read in the press material that you identify as an atheist, if I'm not wrong. Yeah. So yes, of course, you come from Iran, and again, got its own flaws and own problems right now, and it's quite documented in the media currently. So, like, at any point in the movie, did you personally resonated with those, with those personal experiences, or the stuff that you must be reading about the protests in Iran and everything? Because the film, however, on is mostly traversing the Israeli and Palestinian conflict. But of course, as an observer, as a third person, you can't help but relate and resonate that with your personal experiences. So,
yeah, well, the women life freedom protest, that's something new. So that was it's been going on for like 6-7 months now, and it wasn't around at the time when we were filming. But I've always been an advocate for the oppressed, anyone who's oppressed, and I don't really identify as an atheist. I'm just very anti-religion as a whole, because for me, I see religion as the source of conflict.
Yeah, me too.
No matter what religion, it's always like creating conflict and wars and death, and that's the source. Right. And so I have a problem with religion because it's man-made, and therefore it's biased, and it's the source of conflict. What was the other part of the question?
Yeah, like that's what, like if at any point during the production while you were shooting, these beliefs or these ideas, these personal ideas that countered with your character, or your whole experience while shooting the movie.
I think there was one point where Mousa was talking about the I don't remember the exact line, but they made a reference to Iran, and being like wanting to be like Iran, and that really kind of triggered me, because I have an issue with the Islamic Republic, and I remember that was very triggering for me, and my response was a little bit too reactive. And I remember Michael was like, "Okay, let's do it again, but like calm it down," and I still didn't manage to bring it down as much as I probably should have. But yeah, there were points in there where I felt for both sides, and I was triggered personally because of my own personal conflicts or experiences. But again, my role was to be neutral and try to keep it all together, so I couldn't really express myself like that. I don't think that was my position.
Yeah, I think that was a moment. That was the moment, I think, when Mousa, it's like Mousa, the actor, was playing Giuliano, the actor, auditioning for a part as a terrorist, right? As a terrorist, and I think he said something about it, that we should all be like Iran, or like they should, right? Because he was taking an extremist point of view in that specific moment. I think that's actually the moment that we intervene and say, like, try it again, right? That was the first break of the fourth wall.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add that what I liked about Salome's work and character, I can't make a difference if she was her or her character, that I think that even though she was neutral, it didn't feel like it for the actors that are auditioning for her at all. She was trying to piss us off. Mousa is getting, oh, like, what is this shit that I'm reading now, looking like a Saudi sheikh, which is unrelated completely, and I gotta be angry with a heavy accent and all that. And then when it's just constantly instigating like a situation, and she had that weird smirks of like, where are you from really? Like, who the fuck are you really? So I like that, because even if somebody's trying to be neutral, they can't, or at least the other side is going to perceive it as they're not. If an Israeli soldier is going to be interviewed by a Palestinian newspaper, he's going to come from the point of view of like, he's definitely not for me here. He's against me, even if he's not. And then you just see every little sign of what you want to see. And I could see it throughout the whole thing. She's like, I still can't figure out what Yael, the director, or what is the thought behind it, what she believes in, what she wants to see. I don't know. To this day, I don't know what she wants to see. Which one is the good one? Which one is the one that is going to get the part? I have no idea. So it's really, I really liked it, because it was like, for 10 days I was trying to figure out what the hell is she trying to get out of me.
Well, the fact that I didn't know what I was doing.
It looked like you did, and then it's the thing for an actor when you go to audition, you have no idea what the director wants. Like, okay, all right, well, not bad, but let's do it this way. I was like, well, if it's not bad, why do it this way?
Right.
So that was great.
Whatever it was, it came off as like brilliantly subdued condescension.
You know what I decided at the end? I decided I was God.
Yeah, it may be that you were that, right? I mean, you were kind of a concept more than a human.
Yeah.
Which is a question that we constantly negotiated, Salome and I, where she was like, well, what is she, like trying to inhabit a human being and understand their motivations. And I don't think I gave you very good answers, because I think she was written as a concept and you brought something to that, which was, I think, kind of brilliant.
Yeah,
it's also very hard, because I feel like the film itself, and like this is definitely a conflict, that like, Michael and I, conflict is the wrong word, but like something that like we probably disagreed and argued about is just that, like, I think the one woman in the film being written as a concept, like this wasn't a film that was about women or gender, even if maybe Giuliano himself was. And so, like, it is what it is, but it meant that like that there was an intentionality about not creating a character that was going to have that kind of movement that I think is actually really hard for an actor to fill in. And so, I feel like that was part of like the tension of the piece, and of having a woman in that role at all. Especially because part of the conflict that's happening, well, a large part of the conflict that is happening in Israel and Palestine is about gender. And I think, that's the thing that I think, like, really is just unaddressed in so much of these conflicts, is that like, it kind of does start with a conflict about what gender roles are allowed to be. And then in fact, Giuliano was assassinated because he cast girls and boys in a play on a stage where they were acting together, which was not acceptable to the conservatives of either side of his heritage. So it isn't something that like we chose to address there. But it definitely, you know, is a dynamic that we joked about exploring. We're like, oh, maybe the sequel is that this is that there are three women.
And interestingly, like Michael, you said like how your daughter earlier thought that Salome was the one who was directing the movie, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, and so like when I was watching the movie for the first initial few minutes, I thought that she is the director and she is playing herself in the movie, because it's just that I have this, you know, curiosity of you know, analyzing movies, and analyzing what's going on screen. And it was just after a few minutes that I went on the web, I just searched about all of you, about your previous filmographies and everything before I, you know, watched the movie completely. And that's when I realized, okay, so the guy who is breaking the fourth wall is the actual director.
Yeah, I mean
So yeah, I mean,
when I conceived it originally, to be honest with you, Salome's part was written as another bearded man who looks the same as the other three actors, and it was Sarah Szalavitz, it was Braxton Pope, it was, you know, one of my mentors, Julie Carson, who said, look, you cannot make this character a man. For all the different reasons. I mean, Sarah had some great reasons, you know. I think everybody kind of steered me away from that choice, but I think what it did, which was really wonderful to add a female character, was it really, I think it added to the kind of generative confusion of everything. I mean, I think this is the thing, is that this is hopefully a film that allows people to feel that that confusion is a generative experience, right? Doubt, ambiguity, all of those things. I think without a female character in there, it would have been a bit too heavy-handed, which is, you know, something I kept hearing from Sarah and from Braxton.
Yeah, and the way Sarah pointed it out, it actually elevates the movie to another extent, having a female character directing these three men. Yeah. So okay, I'll just I'll wind up with the last two questions. And so first, like the second last is for Karim. Karim, I wanted you to, you know, decode for me from an actor's perspective why your character type won the role, you know, at the end of the movie. Why is really Giuliano, the character that you play, he got the final part? Uh, what do you think? What's your take on that?
No. Yeah. Did he though, or was he just left alone to sit with
He was
the
asked
noise
to,
of it?
he was asked to,
Yeah.
you know, calm himself and, you know, come back. But I think I guess Michael, that was intended that he won the role. Am I right? Or no?
I think
Okay,
I think in
that's
a
up to
in a way.
interpretations.
I think the
No, but
intention is,
I can answer the question in a
Yeah.
way. I think in a way he finished his journey later than the other two. I think in a sense, you know, like the conversation you've been having about the character that Adam played is either you agree immediately. You almost came to an agreement. I saw it in your demeanor that there was you know, you could wrap your understanding around his process. And I think we talked to Mousa afterwards, and we, you know, the importance of that point of view, and then there was that conclusion. I think the character that I'm, character, you know, that facet that I'm traveling with through the story took that much longer to come to its point, to its conclusion. And the reason for it, I feel that, you know, character, for me, we haven't talked about the characters, because if we were talking about characters, you would have said Mousa is calm and, you know, Mousa's character is calm and confident. Adam's character is intellectual, assertive when he needs to be, but removed when he doesn't. And the character that I played, I think, was extremely sensual but passionate about what he was doing. But I think he asks the first question about what it is through the Amos Gitai, you know, film, of what it is to be, you know, in conflict with his condition. He's suffering from being a reservist. He's romanticizing his arrival. He's got his own sort of huge thing to confront about himself. And I think the beauty of him is that he is dealing with profound care for his mother's heritage, profound hope for a land in which he could finally be safe in, profound conflict with the violence that he has to go through. And he is churning up all these different intellectual influences from Rabin, from Arafat, who he can quote from. So you're dealing with somebody who is highly involved with their own identity on so many levels. And I think this is why it took so much longer for him to settle.
And so finally, like my last question would be to all of you about a dialogue, a dialogue that Karim says in the movie. I am forgetting the question that Salome asked him something by the end of the movie, and he says that I'd rather teach the children the history of our future rather than the history of our past. And for me, that dialogue was reflecting the how unnecessary and how unjust this whole political conflicts are, and how and how on a societal level it impacts generation, and and uh, creates generational trauma. So like I just wanted to know from all of you what this particular line means for every one of you. For me it was quite thematic, but
yeah, it's a quote. It's a quote.
Okay. Shimon Peres. It actually comes out of Shimon
Peres. Yeah, it's Shimon Peres. And the way he leads to it, Shimon Peres, is he explains that there is an evolutionary necessity to transcending those kind of conflicts, because he says that for a very long time our survival depended on the land. And because our survival depended on the land, we had to fight for the land. And we had to fight for the number of arms and mouths and feet that we had to cultivate it and protect it. And that in a sense, he was describing a future that was post-agricultural, post-territorial, a future in which if we, for example, if you want to extrapolate, deal with information or deal with technology, we're moving out of the necessity to fight for an inch of land. And in saying that, he's only explaining the root of the conflict in a way that really makes it very human. Because if you think of it, we have this tendency to politicize this conflict. But if you think about Semitic history, which basically you're talking about tribes and you're talking about all these cultures that influenced and conquered each other, and these tribes that influenced and conquered each other, behaviorally, these Semitic tribes who are at war now, in conflict now, are not behaving any different than they ever behaved. There are sometimes imbalances in power and ideological differences, but the fundamental Semitic behavior on that patch of the world is the same. Historically, it's the same. The Romans invaded, the Persians invaded, the Ottomans invaded. Under colonialism, this is what happened. Prior to the decolonization, there was no Israel, but there was no Palestine either, officially in the nation kind of sense. It was an open space and it was tribal. So Peres is describing both something that is obsolete, but also something that is profoundly human. And I think there's wisdom in that, because there is a normalization of, if we continue to be guilty and to look for blame, it's there is a normalization of human behavior. And there is a realization that on an evolutionary level, we may have outgrown territorialism in this particular way. At least that's how I hear it.
Yeah. And yet it's to someone who has experienced the trauma. I agree. I mean, I agree with everything that you're saying, right? And yet, to someone who has experienced the trauma, it seems like an awfully insensitive thing to say, like, can't we just move on and look towards the future, right? I mean, it's the same thing that happens in the United States, in Canada with indigenous peoples. It's like, well,
yeah,
can we just get past that? So I again, I think that phrase is loaded with many meanings. And many of them don't agree, right? That's how I mean, that's how I saw it as a line. I think when it you know, when I saw that he had said that, I thought, well, that's a cruel thing to say, right? It's like, what do you do with trauma? Do you just, how do you move beyond it? Do you just forget it? Do you process it? Is there any way to process intergenerational trauma?
If I may, for me, it was a completely, I'm so surprised that you said that, because it didn't even occur to me about like how insensitive it was to just to move on. Because for me, I thought that he was really trying to break away from the pain of the past and the conflict, right? But also bring about an idea of being liberated and freedom and possibility for the children, for the kids and the future. Because you know, yes, we all experience trauma. Horrible things happen all the time throughout history, but holding on to all of that, what is that going to achieve? It's just going to create more trauma. It's going to create more war. So I didn't even see that side of what you just said, which was really interesting. But that was what I took from it, was looking to the future, liberation, possibility, rather than pain of the past.
Adam, you want to say something?
Yeah, I also agree that it needs to be moved on. Everybody needs to move on and forget eventually. It needs to start as a movement of let's forget it, and maybe in a few generations it can happen. But there are still people that were, you know, in concentration camps. They can't forgive or forget. I have friends that died in suicide bombings in Tel Aviv. I heard the buses explode in Tel Aviv, and with friends of mine that died in them. I mean, I'm ready to move on, but it's very difficult to be like, well, it's okay. It's like if your neighbor murders your wife, you can either fight it and put him in prison, and then he's gonna get pissed off that he's in prison and come out of prison, and then you know, or you can just say, I'll move on. You know, and same for for Palestinians. They were killed and bombed by Israelis, and they grow up in a little kids that grow up in a way that soldiers come in every Tuesday and Thursday to their house with guns and threaten their parents, even though they might have a reason for it because they might be involved in something, but the kids don't get it. So they grow up with a hate and don't understand what's going on. And it's not even a hate at this point. It's just more like why would somebody do this to me? So they grow up in this way. So unless it's a conscious decision of two nations or countries or religions or whatever it would be, to stop going back and thinking about it as a hurt and as something that needs to be resolved, and make a decision of like, okay, from next Thursday on, we're going to start moving towards peace and forgiving. Otherwise, it can never happen because it just keeps on coming back. It just keeps on. And there are forces from all sides that are trying not to stop this. They're wanting to keep going. They have to keep going. And it's for a certain other reason that is unrelated to human beings. They want power, they want land, they want money, they want whatever reason. And they're making sure that these things won't ever happen, won't ever stop. They want the fighting to keep on going. And I think these are the people that needs to be eliminated in order to be able to start building a different future. I think that the future line means that, of like to get to a point when everybody understands that this is bullshit and nothing good is going to ever come out of it.
I feel like it's also though that, like, I don't know, at least where I came to sort of towards the end of this is that like being able to forget is a privilege. And like, it's a very American privilege, especially for like people that are second generation. Like I'm a child of the Holocaust survivor. You know, I'm a third child. So like, I don't remember a time that I didn't know about the Holocaust, you know, if I were first, you know, because I had older siblings, not because my parents were. Anyway, point being is that like, I feel like history is about remembering because powerful people benefit from making sure that you remember. And that's like a way of dividing people and ensuring that the same people have power and money. And it's like, that's what division, like, that's what so many of these divisions are really about. And like being able to have the privilege to go someplace else can be the privilege to forget. But what we've kind of discovered, like, as we learned about the genetics of trauma, is that like, actually, you wind up passing it down anyway. It just kind of expresses itself in a different way. And I don't think I think that there is obviously there is a divide, like being able to figure out the balance of being able to remember and being able to forget is actually the only way that you can move forward.
Right.
Mousa, are you gonna jump in?
Oh no,
No.
because I don't agree with anything anybody says, but that's me.
Dude, I jump in. That's why we love you. We want you to
Yeah.
disagree with, like,
No,
maybe
no,
I'm totally
listen,
saying bullshit. I love it.
I'm more, again, when it comes from the perspective of being a Palestinian, listen, I hear what Adam's saying, but it also, for me, I take it's hard for me to ever justify when a country is in power and subjugates anybody else from being other than Jewish, as perceived as the other, and then abusing their rights just to be as human beings, to justify it in any way by saying that Tuesdays and Thursdays police visit or soldiers visit their house because they may or may have not done anything, or it's a systematic system that's constantly oppressing Palestinians, and until that system is broken, until Israelis do see Palestinians as equals, it's not going to change. That's my perspective. I don't think you can ever justify anything, the checkpoints, the systematic racism, the system of apartheid, by blaming it on the boogeyman, which is Hamas, or saying that Palestinians don't want it, or because they're Muslims versus Jews. It's none of that to me, because I've lived there and I've seen it. So from the perspective that somebody who's an Israeli who serves, they're going to get that one-sided view. And to me, unless you can walk the shoes of both people, and I think that's my privilege as being an American, because I do understand the Israeli side, and I do understand that they want freedom, but you can't have freedom when you consider one over the other. That's just the human perspective. It's the same that's happening here in America. Republicans versus Democrats, or white versus black, and how the police treat black people versus how they treat white people. We know it's wrong, but people will try to justify it. And I don't think there's any justification to treating any human being as the other, period.
And so
Wait,
is this,
I just want to
so you're
say,
making,
I
so hold
totally
on, just
agree.
question. I have a question for Mousa. So is the way that you relate that to the Perez quote is you're making a case for not forgetting? Is that how you tie these two things together?
No, I'm just going on some of the stuff that came after people's
Okay.
points of view. I think when it comes to the Perez quote, I don't think anybody should ever forget where they come from or the abuses that they've had. I would never, ever deny somebody from the atrocities of the Holocaust by saying it didn't exist, or you're making it bigger.
Right.
You're making it bigger than it seems. That's not what I'm saying. I don't think anyone should ever forget. And I think it's more about moving forward with the understanding of the other and using that as a tool to say, this has happened to us. This is what's happened to us. How do we stop it from happening to one another? Period. But that being said, it's hard because I do see Israel and Palestine as two different, it's one has the power versus the other. One has nuclear weapons versus rocks. It's just,
yeah.
It's you can never justify it to me.
Just to be clear,
I can.
I completely agree with you, and I don't.
I know you.
What I was saying was not a dissent from what you know what I'm saying, because I feel like you started by saying I don't agree with what anyone was saying. I don't think that you can. I don't think you could ignore the things that are happening in the present day at all. It either. But so I just wanted to correct in case I was misheard.
I think what's happening here is interesting, because I think what we're doing is a little bit what we were doing in describing those people who were playing those types. Underneath those people, they were still characters. So saying that any of those three is conceptual or not conceptual is just a projection. The reality is, what if we were robbing Shimon Peres of the ability to just be an intellectual and not an Israeli or a Palestinian? What if Shimon Peres is just sitting there thinking about his legacy, reflecting metaphorically on an idea, but suddenly we're robbing him of the privilege of being just a dude having a thought about a random thought about memory and the evolution of the relationship to territory. And this, I think, is the very method by which dehumanization happens. And I think that dehumanization happens through identity, not through the negation of identity.
That one's a little tough to swallow, but you're saying that it's it's not through the dehumanization of identity.
I'm saying that we are dehumanizing this person Perez because we're only listening to what he's saying through the prism of the conflict, right? So we're making him into an idea. And I'm saying that the way that we dehumanize each other is not by negating each other's identities, it's by enforcing them. It is as convenient for an Israeli to call a Palestinian Palestinian as it is for a Palestinian to call an Israeli Israeli, because once you have reduced the other, the character, to the type, this is where the dehumanization occurs. We've even done it in this conversation. We were saying, I'm going to ask you about the character, and then you asked about the type. And then we decided that a type that was actually that was actually channeling two theoretical aspects together was more complete than two types that were channeling one, as if there were no people that were just Israeli or just Palestinian. And we didn't talk about their characters at all. And even the trap is so pervasive that even with us and with all our little liberal intentions, we're sitting here talking about a form of reconciliation, and we're bringing binary and polarity in every single step of the way that we're doing it. And I think it very well may be that Shimon Peres had a moment at the end of his life or towards the end of his career where he was just having a philosophical thought. And why should I take that away from him?
Yeah, I guess what Karim is trying to say, that that particular quote extends beyond one particular event or one particular person. So yeah, it's a whole metaphorical idea.
But what if every single one of, what if every single conversation that is actually connected to an idea is in nature transcendental?
Right.
What if the minute that we try to describe things through conflict, we're reducing character to type and identity to nationality or religion, which is they're quite weak concepts. I mean, they're big historically, but they're weak. What's the difference? I don't know. I think the beauty of the film is that it puts us in a situation where even us are tested by exposure to this film. Even the debate that we're having amongst people who pretty much were thinking along the same lines, I think this movie is structured in a way where it's testing our capacity to actually deliver ourselves in the conversation from types that we are accepting immediately for the sake of talking about a conflict. We're accepting the divisiveness of them. The real simple answer is there is absolutely no bloody difference for an actor in playing any of those characters. And as an actor, there is no difference in the tears that you cry thinking about, a settler or thinking about a Palestinian. And I think that is the fundamental idea. Character is not in the identity. Character is in the behavior, in the capacity for love, and the kindness, in the attributes of passion, and the attributes of subduedness, intelligence, humor. And I think we're brushing over that. And I think the movie is great because it exposes us too.
I want to throw something else out there about this quote, because I think that this had not occurred to me until we were actually having this conversation now. Like, what is fun and interesting about those quotes is that they are devoid of context. And for me, that's a quote that, like, and I don't know if this is true or not, or I've made this up. So, like, let me be clear that could be wrong. In my head, that he was talking to the MIT Media Lab and
Yes.
like giving and performing in the context of that character after he had left office and saying things
Yes,
that he could
after
not have
office.
said. Like saying things he could have not have said that he would have liked to said because he actually believes, but in terms of the role he was cast in historically and democratically, arguably democratically, it was his job to not say that then. What's interesting though, if you look at like the apartheid quotes, none of those came from people out of office. They were all in office when they said that, when they were saying those
You
things.
got my point. That's my point. Thank you, Sarah. That's my point. That's my point. That's my point. And I think we owe it to this is what we owe each other. We owe each other the benefit, the gift of freedom. It's like, you know, it's not just forgiveness. You know, people say you forgive no, it's not just forgiveness. It's assuming that at some point everybody is going to take their clothes off, their Arab gown, their military gowns, their civilian gown. But there's a point of actual centrality. I don't know. There's a non-localized self kind of thing, and it's really important, even if we don't forgive each other, at least to recognize the fact that deep down we are free of the roles we've played. That there is a part of us that is free of the role we played, and this is what I want from this film, not to be another depiction of this side or that side, because that's intellectually void. Everybody knows what's going on. The interesting thing about it is how we're challenged to speak about identity and the value of it. And forgive me for saying my character is not Israeli Giuliano. My character is a passionate, agile, arrogant, loving, provocative guy who really has a deep relationship to his history, to his land, romantic, and who loves his mother and who wanted to be a performer. That's my character. There is no Israeli Giuliano. There is no Arab Giuliano.
Wow, well said, Karim. So I guess, yeah, that's it from my end. If Michael, if you want to add anything.
That's a good way to end.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time. I know it must be very, very like.
Thank you very much.
I'm surprised you're awake.
Thanks to you guys. Like it went way beyond 1 hour, and thank you for your patience and sitting through it. And really, it was really a pleasure to come across this movie. I guess I was lucky to when Alan sent me that that screener, I was online to accept it. Otherwise, it would have been to another writer, I guess, at FilmThread. So yeah, I guess I was lucky to come across this movie, and I'm a big like lover of cinema. So yeah, I'm always looking out for such kind of films which which challenges the basic elements of filmmaking, basic elements of developing a narrative, which this movie does so profoundly. And all the best for further screenings, further festival runs. I hope you guys come to India.
Yeah, I'd love to come to India.
Yeah, like so because I actually was having a chat with Michael, and I just suggested him to like just to submit the film for the International Film Festival over here, because which is like the biggest one over here. And I visited it last year, and came across some amazing films, especially from Iran. Like that was like Holy Spider, and I think I watched Holy Spider over there for the first time. I watched World War III. So yeah, I hope that happens, and I get to meet some of you personally, maybe.
Fantastic. That would be.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye bye.
We'll stop.